Hi, everybody. This is John from RAINMKR, and I'm really excited about the chat I'm going to have with Carly here today. We're talking about this a little bit today. There's a lot of thought leaders in the space. I think Amazon gurus kind of get like a bad rap. But besides that fact, Carly is somebody that I've been following for a while, and I think she has an exceptional POV when it comes to Amazon advertising and just a really fresh in the trenches look. And so we put together a number of topics today that I think a lot of people find helpful, whether it be, whether you're a seller or a freelancer or an agency owner and things like that. Just kind of like a gritty, in the weeds look and POV on things. So Carly, can you kind of tell us your story a little bit and tell us how you got your start?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here, and the chat today I think is going to be super useful for folks. And so how I got into things. So I actually started working for the parent company of PPC Farm, which is the agency that I'm operating now. And I started working for that company doing product development. So the parent company, I guess a little bit more background, is an Amazon seller. Been selling on Amazon since about 2015, 2016, back when it was the Wild West, as people say. You could just kind of slap something on Amazon and it would sell. Actually, they got started doing more like retail arbitrage, moved on to private label, and then doing original IP products now, patents and all that stuff. Kind of a normal, trajectory for a lot of big sellers. So that's the parent company of PPC Farm. Thousands of SKUs, about a dozen brands at this point across several different niches. And I started doing product development for them. So I was able to everything from start to finish for developing a product for sale on Amazon. So including market research, deciding what's the next product we should go after, right? All the way to dealing with vendors, sourcing, logistics, and then of course putting the listing together and doing the marketing, right? So really that whole process for probably 15, 16 different products that we launched. That's something that the company is really good at is launches. And so being able to kind of see that whole process, I think has been really valuable to me and to the agency as well, kind of getting that perspective and understanding, what a seller really needs to go through and how challenging it can be. And not all those products that I developed were winners, some of them flopped, and that's just kind of part of the game, right? So that's really how I got started in the world of Amazon. And then we decided to start the agency about 3-4 years ago. Just basically, we had sort of solved PPC, right? We had to get advertising to a point that we could scale it across our thousands of SKUs. And we were like, you know what, let's offer this to other sellers, right? And we still are, the parent company is still in operation today. We still sell today. And I think that that's where I would maybe put myself more in the camp of a seller than a guru, right? Because we're really doing it, right? We're really selling and still dealing with all we actually have a department called Amazon BS. We're in it, So that's kind of how I got started in the world of Amazon and when we started the agency.
That is awesome. I'm just going to ask a couple follow-up questions. So first of all, I think I think what I share with you is the product side of it is it's by far my favorite part of the Amazon business. And there's obviously things that we all hate, like compliance, dealing with Amazon itself, like the Amazon BS piece. But I'm probably going to ask you a couple more questions there. I think a lot of my content stems around product development, innovation. Actually, our brand lead, Eric, worked at Procter & Gamble for a while, Nestle, and he shares a passion for that too. So what took you from product development over in the advertising? Was it just a necessity and there was an agency that could really fit your guys' needs there? So you kind of spun off in that direction and went that way. How did that transition happen?
Yeah, so I think, with e-commerce in general, and I think especially on Amazon, if you don't understand the marketing piece, it's really almost impossible for you to develop good products, right? If you don't understand how who your audience is and how they're shopping and how to speak to them, you aren't going to put out a good product, right? So if you don't understand kind of everything from end to end, I think that you can get in trouble, right? So I think that that's really where it came from. It was kind of hey, I need to figure out the whole marketing piece, right? Or we need to make sure that is part of the conversation and part of the story in order to put our best foot forward, basically. So I think, and especially on Amazon, SEO and all that's so important. Everything is so bottom of funnel. If you don't know who your audience is, right? Even from when you're developing the product and figuring out, okay, what are the features and benefits that I'm even trying to go for? If you don't have that listing, like a picture of the listing and the images and everything in your mind when you're developing the product, it can go kind of awry. Like I see a lot of folks, they just pick a product because it's something that they would use or whatever, right? Or something that they're interested in, which can work out sometimes, but to really do it properly, I think you need to kind of, have the whole end game in your mind from the beginning.
Those are all such good points. I think Amazon is kind of, to me, it's like the ultimate, probably the best human, proving ground. And I think in e-commerce or even business history in terms of like innovation, because there's so many data fed decisions that you can make and the market responds in real time.
Yeah.
And I think that Amazon outward focus you can find a lot of winners that could win cross market. So yeah, those are all really, really good points. And it's just really cool that you're approaching it from that angle, because I think I mentioned this before in kind of our chats prior. People can kind of get lost because there's so much information out there. As you know, there's lots of good information, just lots of information. I don't think there's bad information. I think there's lots of information, right? And so there's like tactics and hacks. You have all these different things that are promising all, the moon and the stars and, 500% growth and all of this other stuff. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to me to that product innovation piece. And the saying goes, bad product, good market, wins. Good product, bad market wins. Right. So, finding those opportunity pockets and deploying a really good product that solves those use cases, to me, that's the secret sauce of the whole machine. So I think it's awesome that you approach it from that angle. And I think that's probably been very advantageous on the PPC side, especially because you're looking at it from a marketing perspective, not so much like a PPC pure data perspective. And I think we probably share this POV in that I think a lot of Amazon advertisers, I'm not picking at them by any means, right? That's not what I'm saying here, is that it's a closed box. And this is a big complaint that we've had from clients that we've acquired over the years, is that it's a very closed box and they can't see outside of that advertising, like, frame of reference. Like it's just PPC, not PPC, it's just CPCs and CTRs. And there's this big picture that exists outside of that affects those little itty bitty levers, but they're stuck in there and they're kind of like, getting banged up on the waves until you understand the bigger picture. So I'm sure it served you well and your clients well over the years. That's super cool. Great intro. Great story, by the way. Let's jump in here. One of my favorite things to talk about is like if there's like best practices, right? And there's what I like to call like Amazon folklore, where things are just kind of repeated and then everybody accepts that as like the round peg that fits in every hole, even though there's different shaped holes along the way. And so there's like, I call them like counterculture insights from like practitioners that learn things along the way that, like, for example, one I always like to call out is that I think this has gotten better. I think this has kind of been dispelled, is that everything basically needs to distill down to exact match, right? I think that is one of the very common things where like a lot of people get stuck, hyper low bidding, low budgets, and exact match targeting is the holy grail. And what you end up with is no impression share, gross impression volume, all that stuff drops. So what I was going to ask you first is what are your kind of what you would say like out of the box counterculture approaches that kind of fly in the face of like the norms that you guys have found helpful?
Yeah, so I think that one that I think I posted, I don't know, it was maybe even like over a year ago, my opinion on this, and it was a hot take apparently. So I got a lot of pushback in the comments, but I think that there's kind of, a best practice that's widely used, which is every brand and every product, every seller needs to do brand defense. But I don't actually agree with that. And I think that a lot of times, particularly agencies or freelancers running PPC, love the brand defense campaigns because they just look so good. The conversion rate is inevitably going to be amazing because that intent is so high, right? Like obviously if someone is searching for your brand, they already want your product. But we've run the math, and it's pretty simple, back of the napkin kind of math, that if you basically just don't need to pay for those sales, right? If someone is searching for your brand, then especially if you are a smaller kind of seller, if you're more private label, right? Like I'm not saying there's never a place for this, but the idea that every single seller and everybody needs to be doing brand defense, I think is misguided. And you can actually save money and be more profitable, run more profitable campaigns by not running brand defense. And those sales that maybe you lose, I don't know, even if you lose like 50% of your sales, 50% of clicks in those cases where someone chooses competitor, you're still going to end up being more profitable because you didn't pay for the sales that you are getting. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly with the math, but there's definitely a time and a place. Like there are niches that are hyper competitive. Like if you're Nike, yeah, you need to be doing brand defense because, someone goes and buys Adidas, right? Like those kinds of cases, or where for example, your brand name is your product, right? Then those cases, yeah, brand defense is necessary. And if it's hyper competitive, yes. But if you're just selling, like a private label spatula or something like that, running brand defense is probably not going to, do much for you, right? So I think that's kind of a myth or a best practice that I think is not a one size fits all.
That's such a good point. Yeah, especially if it's the view through conversion, the VCPM, those are really juicy, aren't they? You go on, you look at the kind of high water line on that. I think you guys, because you're coming at it from the business angle first and then getting in the agent side. I think that's so important. That's such a good approach because you're looking at it from a business operator standpoint first and then an advertising standpoint second, right? And so those, I mean, especially on the VCPM campaigns, those brand defense ones, man, you can have, I mean, you're looking at, I've seen single digit A costs with thousands and thousands of dollars.
Right.
And actually pretty chunky spend. The ironic thing is when you look at the total sales, that's my waterline, my gross sales. So all sales, okay, I'm having all these thousands of dollars come through this campaign. I'm pouring money into it. Why is top line not increasing, right? And then, and we've tested this as well, especially small stores. Like that is such a good caveat there. Is like, it depends on the scale of the brand. I mean, if you're small, private label, just getting started, you got 2 or 3 SKUs. I mean, is it worth throwing away up to 20% of your budget on brand defense? It is from the agency side, not to pick.
Right.
It makes the reporting look nice, right? But it's costing people money that they don't have to spend. And I think the fact that it's not cookie cutter, that's what this whole part of the discussion is for. And so that was really cool. And I think I had a couple here. I think I talked about this. This is kind of mine, and this actually drew a lot of controversy as well. And I think when we look at bid strategies, right, like up, down, down only, fixed, at this particular time, fixed was the way. Fix bids. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think the first one is that if I'm running, a lot of people might not have software, on the agency side. They'll have like Google Sheets or macros that they run. And if you run a fixed bid structure, it's a lot easier to control and figure out what's going on, right? So I think that's one layer. I don't think that's an ideal way just to use fixed bids, but I think a lot of times, practitioners in particular, because we have to have that, we try to keep that expert hat on and we need to maintain that for our business or whatever, tend to think that we can outsmart Amazon. Somehow we know better. Our formulas are going to outsmart Amazon's bid algorithm. And it sounds great and you can make great posts. And I'm sure there's some case studies showing that, but at the end of the day, I kind of look at things from a common sense perspective, right? And I think, Amazon, they spent, if not, it's got to be tens of millions, if not more, on their ad tech, right? And so I think will we just dismiss up, down, for example, which one I'm going to talk about in a second, just because we think that just frivolously, spending money and there's no growth there. I think you're missing what could be a potential opportunity because we somehow have this illusion that we can outsmart the ad tech. Now, there are certain situations where Amazon is trying to steal our money. Brand defense, right? They're definitely trying to sell more inventory. So that's a balancing act. But I think up, down has significant benefits, right? I think especially in launch, I think especially if the brand's established, depending on how competitive the auction is on a keyword, I think it has there's a lot of, and we've tested this heavily. I've tested, fixed high bid at the max threshold with high modifiers to kind of test it against. And for some reason or another, if you're being aggressive, up, down, it gets more impressions, it gets more clicks, it can generate more conversions. Now, there are times when it gets inefficient and falls apart, right? Like Prime Day, you have to shift the strategy. But if you're looking for raw sales volume, it's worth testing, right? I think a lot of times these things get put in a back corner. Nobody ever tests it. And when I see those types of things happen in the conversation, I always get excited because to me, that's an opportunity. If everybody's shying away from something, that usually means that you can move over into that spot and realize some benefits. So yeah, great points. I think that a lot of people find that helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that up and down really got a bad rep, but I agree that especially like you said during a launch or anytime you're trying to be more aggressive for whatever reason, like if it's, peak season for your product and you want to try out some seasonal campaigns or something like that, then it can be a great way to really make sure that you're capturing that traffic because we do tend to default to down only. I will say we take a little bit more of an efficient approach. And I think that, even it has been hard to convince some folks to try the up and down, but I do think there's a time and a place for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for the most part, I would say 70% of maybe 75% of our active campaigns across the portfolio are down only, a variation of down only or fixed bids, depending on the strategy. But I think, man, I've just had a lot of success with up and down in more than a few situations, to the point where I don't necessarily, it's not a default, right? But I would recommend that people at least test it in certain situations, or at least give it a go to at least see how it does and test it against other bid strategies. And clearly you don't want to be at the upper end of the bid range and then let it go crazy on 100 because you can end up all over the place. And it's trickier because there is that, even with down only, there's a threshold zone, right? And so it can get tricky to manage the bids to get them to where you want to be. You got to work that sweet spot, but I think there's value there. So all really, really good points. What would you say you're like, I think everybody has I think Elizabeth Green has one that she loves. Like I've took note of everybody's what's their kind of their go-to, their favorite thing that they do in pretty much all accounts, right? And I think Elizabeth Green I took it and it does work well. It was the catch-all low bid auto. I use it in all my accounts now. So that was a help.
Oh, yeah.
What would you say your guys's would be if you could isolate one thing that you kind of that kind of is like the cookie cutter that you found to be successful in most scenarios?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so low bid autos is a great one. We use that every single ASIN in our portfolio has. Actually, we do 2 low bid auto campaigns for each ASIN at different bid thresholds. So we start one, which we call our micro auto at 5 cents, and we start our catch-all at 20 cents and adjust from there. So we're kind of trying to see how cheap can we get those catch-alls. So yeah, so that's a great one. But, I guess I kind of have 2 in here. So I have one that I think is kind of like PPC 101 that is it's solid and it works for everything. And then my second one is a little bit more avant-garde. So the solid, the foundational one I would say is really just discovery campaigns to maintenance campaigns and harvesting those keywords. And if you have good keyword research, this is going to work every single time, right? PPC is not rocket science. Once you understand how all the match types work and all of that, we set up broad category targeting and full auto, which just is our terminology for a higher bid auto campaign with the intention of keyword discovery. We set those up and then we harvest product targets and exact targets into our maintenance campaigns. This is PPC 101, right? But it's foundational and it works, and it's something that does work across the board, because you just can't predict all the crazy ways that customers are going to search for things. And if you try to just go for the highest search volume term and an exact match and try to compete on that, it's just not going to be likely profitable in the long run. And so the strategy that I'm describing works so well because you're getting all of those kind of huge variety of long tails, right? So this strategy, like I said, it's kind of PPC basics, but it works, right?
Yeah, I mean, pillars are super important. What was the avant-garde thing?
Okay, so the new thing that we rolled out for almost every single client is we call them placement campaigns. So I think I talked about this with Elizabeth as well as kind of a hack. But so we separate out the 3 placements available in sponsored products, so top of search, rest of search, and product pages into their own campaigns. So any keyword that we have discovered through our discovery process or our farming process is put into those 3 campaigns and those placement campaigns, and we set the bid multiplier to the maximum. So the base bid is lower, but then we set 900% multiplier on those placement campaigns to essentially force the traffic and force performance to go to those specific placements. And by doing that, we're able to actually get really granular with how much we want to exactly be bidding for top of search, rest of search, and product pages. And we didn't used to be able to do this because I think it was around middle of last year, maybe, they finally rolled out multipliers on product pages. And so since we now have all the 3 placements, we're able to actually force traffic. So you still get some impressions and clicks trickling in into the other placements. But with that maximum multiplier, it forces traffic to go to those placements.
By the way, folks, this works.
Yeah.
Works. I tested it. I was talking chat with Carly before we kick things off day, and we've tested that, and it does work. And it is a tried and true. That went into my bucket of things. Like, I know that this works consistently. And to me, that's like the secret sauce. That's like the fun part of what we do. You know, the in the trenches grade. That's how you could tell a practitioner from somebody that's more talking about it than doing it, right? And so, yeah, that one is super cool. I would say my favorite one, I absolutely love broad match modifiers. Like, I love them. I think there's a couple things I really like about it, right? So it allows you, I think phrase match is a little bit too restrictive in certain situations. And what broad match modifiers, what we allow them to do is I can scrape around a high volume keyword without eating it. That's probably my favorite way of saying it. So let's just say yoga mat. I mean, that's going to be a bloodbath keyword if you're a new launch, but you can use yoga. I think Michael, right? I think he's Ngram. That's his name for it.
Yeah.
Keyword roots. It's the same space, right? Like, I can take the same keyword root and add modifiers on it lots and lots of different ways around high volume keywords. And we've had a lot of success at like lower CPs and driving conversions on those subsets of keywords, like yoga mat women. Like, you can kind of put these different keyword things together and allow it to kind of like scrape around in a small area without Amazon going off into left field. And the other thing that we've noticed internally from our internal research is that if you capture a lot of conversions from like a core keyword root, it increases the preference for placement on that main keyword over time. So that's been a really good learning for us, because a lot of times it's not necessarily the keyword's not profitable, it's that you're page 3. But if Amazon starts to see that you're relevant and you're capturing conversions on all these different variations of that keyword, you can usually pivot back to, and your performance will improve on that core root keyword over time. So I would say that one has been really, really cool for us. And I would say the other one that I'm pretty excited about is Amazon added this audience layer, which I'm sure you're aware of, with a high likelihood to purchase and all these other things. And kind of in these infant stages, like, this is the time to go hard at those things, because efficiency evaporates quickly. It's probably going to evaporate quicker. I remember when Sponsored Brands Video came out, and I praised them. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. This placement's great. And then within a short period of time, click prices were like $16 a click on some people. And you could still win there, but it's not as easy. I would say if anybody hasn't tried high likelihood to purchase in terms of a segmentation layer, not in every instance, but I would say in a lot of instances, and even in some pretty competitive spaces, that's something that people are going to want to test. And the other thing there, which I think was pretty cool, which we haven't tested a ton of yet, is that I want to use the add to cart audience part. I don't remember the exact.
Oh, yeah.
To expand my retargeting into search. And because typically your retargeting is like stuck. Like, I'm stuck on the PDP, right? And I'm stuck in these obscure placements. But I think you can now kind of push your retargeting into like where the money is by using that layer. And I think I feel like moving forward, like, that's going to be a really, really good angle to get more conversion around and drive more meaningful revenue. So I think that those are pretty cool. So great stuff there. What else do we got here?
And on really quick on your broad modifier, I just wanted to say, a lot of people don't realize that Amazon kind of switched to true broad, right? So those broad modifiers and all that is more and more important. You can even see now you have keywords in your campaigns that are in English and your customer search terms are in Spanish. So like being really mindful of exactly what kind of seeds are going into your broad is super duper important. So that's all.
That's awesome. Yeah. Great way to control spend and kind of like kill two birds with one stone. So, and I think a lot of times too, like kind of going back to like best practices, like pigeonholing, people think of keywords in terms of like exactly what's being displayed equals this search volume. And I think it kind of gets you out of that framework, and it gets into like, you can, there's layers to that where you can explore a little bit more outside of like the rigmarole keyword list to kind of get some good traction. DSP. This is kind of like another one of my hot takes. And I have a lot of, I don't want to say passionate. I'm just going to say passionate. I have pretty intense POV on DSP. And so I thought this would be a good thing to chat through. What's your honest take on DSP? If you're just shoot from the hip, we're at a bar having drinks with some people and what's your take on it?
Yeah, so I think that DSP is kind of this thing that people will try when they've sort of run out of other ideas, right? Like they know that they need to do a big awareness type of a campaign. And so like, it's just so shotgun, that I think that oftentimes the actual return that you're seeing, even with proper attribution, isn't what people think. So like earlier you mentioned that the, total sales, right? Your top line revenue, that line, you might not even see that number go up with your DSP, right? So I think it's not like, I know again, like this is quite a hot take. I know that it does work for some folks, but for our clients who have tried it with us as well as with other agencies, because sometimes you need the third party to kind of verify things and get a seat at the table, all that, have ended up just cutting it, right? So I think that we have this huge marketing budget that we need to spend, and DSP is a good way to do that and say, hey, wow, look at us. We're on, like a bunch of random websites or whatever. Like we've actually had more, like if you do need something more awareness and that's what the brand is looking for, we've had more success with sponsored TV compared to DSP, which is something that is, I think, more accessible to people and can still get that top of funnel as well. So I think that DSP absolutely can work for some folks, but I don't know that it is the kind of cure-all that some folks maybe think.
Yeah, great points. I think, and it's not so much DSP and that whole band. I mean, that's not my real bugaboo with it. It's display advertising in general, right? And so I'm going to date myself here in age, but like in the 2000s, display advertising was where it was at. And so you would go to websites and there would be, you could capture clicks that way, but display placements are noise. If we're really honest, like I can't, and maybe it's just me, but I can't tell you the last time I've clicked a display ad and bought ever. I mean, maybe it's reminded me of something kind of, which is fine. So you could say there is some utility there, but how many thousands of dollars were poured into that spot for me to like obscurely one time determine that, hey, this is going to get me closer to my view, to my purchase decision. And I think there's an argument to be made to the marketing adage that it takes at least 7 impressions or 7 times to get in front of somebody to get them to make a purchase decision. So, I acknowledge that. But when if we're looking at things like in terms of awareness, and again, this is just my 2 cents worth. If I'm trying to push awareness, I want to capture somebody's attention. To me is like the most important thing. That's why I think sponsored TV was such a great call out. They have no choice. It's the entire screen, right? Or like it like depending on the place, like I'm owning their attention. Like we've done a lot with influencer marketing, things like that, where like I'm in the feed and I own like I want, even if it's a split second, I want myself to be the only thing they see. And so if we're talking about awareness, if I'm peripheral vision off in the left field, like, and even if I'm a pop-up, if they have to click out of the way, like that frustration piece, like I don't know that there's a lot of utility there. If it was less expensive, right? And it's very expensive. I mean, like you said, to get a seat at the table, if you're not using like software, working with an agency, I mean, those DSP seats are not cheap, right? And so you have to have minimum spend commitments of a lot of money. And I think a significant amount of money. And I think the other thing you called out, which was really, really great too, Carly, was like, and boy, wouldn't it be nice if everybody was in this place? Sometimes these brands have disposable ad budget, right? Potentially tens of thousands of dollars. And they're like, I got to spend this money. Well, product development would be a great place. Let's talk about that. I think there's other ways to deploy capital, even if it's not necessarily media, that can grow the business in more meaningful ways. And I think, are there use cases where DSP could have some utility? In my opinion, yes, probably. If I've exhausted all my other options, if I'm fully throttled on, if I'm spending a lot of money in social, I'm trying to like expand out and just fill out my, my media mix. I think it definitely has some utility there. But I think what it's ended up becoming, and again, this is just opinion, it's almost like a badge of bigness and importance necessary, and I think, if you're like and what I classify as like medium-sized stores, like let's say like 3 to 10 million, like in that range, like if you're that size business, I don't know that badges of importance should be that important to you as much as growing your business. And so I think that's kind of like my big bugaboo with DSP. And I think there's other things about it too. If they could just separate AMC out from it and I didn't have to deal with the DSP part. I think AMC is great. I think there's so much utility there and so much juicy stuff, but like the fact that you almost have to pay Amazon to unload its excess inventory on you to have access to that is something that frustrates me. And kind of like my last point on DSP would be is that Amazon advertising, I think it's a business at the end of the day, right? And there's going to be inventory that's very, very high demand because it drives the most amount of purchases. And if I need to continue to grow the advertising part of my business, what do I need to do? I need to invent more placements to sell. Right. And so we have all this excess inventory out here that I have to sell, and it's not super valuable. So I feel like what Amazon did is they added all these gadgets. I call it like a laser light show, and there's all these little metrics and all these little things that I can paint this big picture. But if you like crawl around through it and you actually figure out what's going on, it's like, yeah, I have all these positive KPIs. Like 12,000 different, data points I can talk about with DSP of why it's working. Right. And I can make a really good looking report. But like you said, when I actually look at the impact on my business and the sellers look at the impact on the business, whether it's on or off, knock on wood, to this day, I've yet to have it make a meaningful impact, whether you turn it off or turn it on. I think that's probably not a super popular take with some people. That's just my opinion. If people want to try and do it, I'm saying I'm all for it. But I think if you're like Nike or somebody like that, somebody big and you got disposable income, great. I think if you're trying to grow your business, I think, I'll die on this hill. Product innovation is where it's at. I really that, meaningful additions to the catalog, like that's what's going to grow your business in an impactful way. Right. And so, yeah, great points there. Good stuff. The other thing I wanted to chat about was as marketers, we operate in a space of sunshine and rainbows and rosy pictures. That's just part of the game. Like if we want somebody to be part of our business, like we need to show that we're good and we're good at what we do. And look at all this growth we're driving and yay. And everybody's telling this thing. You go from agency site to agency site or expert page to expert page. And it's hundreds and hundreds of % of growth in every screenshot and everything. And I get that. And everybody has banner case studies. I do. And I'm sure you do as well. But I feel like I've had some really good learnings from successes. Most of my learnings have come from painful, basically failures, right? Like I'll just talk about mine first. Like, I've had a brand and it was like just you guys suck and left. Like they were a longtime partner of ours and they were in health and beauty and they made like bars for it was bar soaps for like hair care, right? And they were really big in Brazil and they gave Amazon US about a 5-year go. And prior to coming on boarding with us, they probably went through 3 agencies. Right. During COVID and after COVID and the last were to push DSP. And that's kind of how we got our in with them was out through DSP is like this is, you guys are spending the same amount of budget on DSP as you are in sponsored search. What are we doing? So anyway, so that was kind of how that started. And over time, they weren't competitive, right? As you know, there's parts of the business where the product has to be good at the end of the day. And it wasn't that their product wasn't good. It's that what we ended up learning is that there's definitely cultural differences in geos, right? And so a great example would be like deodorant was one of the things that they launched. And it was a chemical free, that was kind of their shtick, right? Their whole catalog was built that way. Well, in Brazil, people didn't care about the perspiration piece, like the antiperspirant piece, as much as they do in the US. So they launched over here and then they just didn't want to change the formula based on the learnings that they were getting from the market. Another example would be the bar soaps didn't lather, right, as well as they could have. And while you can make the argument listing by trying to tap dance with content, which we tried mightily to do, people still expect it to lather. Like Eric actually pointed this out to me when we worked at P&G, is that Dawn actually doesn't need to make suds. They add that. It's just as effective without the suds, but people think the suds make the dishes clean. And so they just weren't able to make those meaningful product pivots that could keep their rating high over time. And then sales slowly erode. They pull back marketing budget, sales erode. And then here they are today. They ended up, kind of pivoting and moving away. And I think that was a good learning experience for us because as we talked about in the beginning of our discussion is that the marketing, the big picture, the product, piece, all of that stuff, that's the foundation that makes everything else work. I look at advertising as like lighter fluid, fire goes quick, but I need wood on the fire. And I think that was just a really good learning for us is that sometimes brands are I won't say they were in love with their formula, but they're really stubborn there. And so sometimes you can't win. The other one was in COVID. And I think this was like a huge learning for me in terms of like, you guys have probably been down this road. Somebody launches, let's say it's a new seller and they want to launch a new product. Is this going to work? Am I going to make money? Like what? And so that's always a question. What's the forecast? Like we always have to go down those roads. And so you try to learn things along the way that kind of let you put your finger in the air and figure out what the weather is going to be. Well, these guys decided to sell hand sanitizer in peak COVID. Very, very motivated. Like it's basically a no-win scenario. I was willing to try anyway, but this is what I ended up learning from that is that the search interest, the ways people can get to that product, that they're willing to search and explore that product, very limited in scope, maybe 3 or 4 terms, like not many. The problem with that is like you're going to have tens of thousands of sellers at that time competing on 3 keywords. There's no long tail traction, right? And so what I ended up figuring out over the years through different launches that I think were the most success, because a lot of times the numbers aren't going to be great. You know that I might not have 30% ACOS month one, probably in most situations. Doesn't mean the product's not going to work. But one thing that we look at internally is like, I like to see every reporting period, like whether it be every week or every 30 days for probably the first 8 to 12 weeks, the number of search terms that you are converting on, your search footprint needs to grow, right? And it's not so much important of like the ACOS of those terms, but my search footprint grows. As long as your search footprint continues to grow, and you're getting conversions across different spots, you're going to win the long term. So a lot of times that's what we look at. And that was a huge learning for me to let me go, like, Bill, talk people off the cliff and say, listen, it's not the end of the world. Like our search footprint's growing week over week. Like I think we just need to hang in there, stay the course. And sometimes that's what it is. But that's what it's about. Sometimes you tread water long enough and something gives way. But what are some things, some scenarios that you've kind of been through over the years that you think that were like hard knocks on the head learning experiences that you walked away from with some good insights?
Yeah, absolutely. We, have had our fair share of clients who like you said, it was kind of just like not market fit, not for a cultural reason, but just because they chose a niche that the competition was really, really high and they were unwilling to come down on price or whatever, right? Whatever that look, or redo their images or whatever, right? And so we've had our fair share of those where it was just kind of like, since we talked about at the beginning, like how everything is really holistic, and we've gone back and forth on whether or not we should really be full service or not. But since we are mostly just managing PPC and consulting, I know
you're very knowledgeable. That's okay. Keep going.
Because I know, but we just don't like to do something unless we're like the best at it, kind of a thing. So we consult, obviously, but in terms of like we don't have a graphic designer that'll be able to do your images or whatever. But anyway, so we've had our fair share of those. But I think that one brand that really stood out to me was a CPG brand. It's actually tea, and from the beginning, it was so our whole deal is profit first advertising, and so that sounds maybe like, well, obviously everybody wants profit, but there are a lot of strategies out there that are really more optimized towards top line or just, a low ACOS or whatever, right? But so our whole deal is profit first advertising. So one of the first and arguably most important things that we ask all of our clients is for their COGS, their cost of goods, so that we can actually understand the contribution margin of every single ASIN in their portfolio. And we use that then as our North Star, right? We use that contribution profit as a target ACOS at the campaign level and even at the term level. So we know, hey, this term or this campaign isn't profitable, right? So if you have a 30% margin on an ASIN and you're running at a 40% ACOS, not profitable, right? So that's kind of the core of our strategy. So that's one of the most important questions. And, we had onboarded this brand and they were like really, really slow. Oh, we have to talk to our accounting department, whatever. And they couldn't get us their cost of goods. And we just kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt because they were relatively large. And, you kind of assume that they would have it together, But so it was probably like 3 or 4 weeks until we finally got their cost of goods. We put it into our system and we realized they are losing money before we even spend $1 on ads. Like their margins are negative. And I know that in CPG margins are thin and this is a thing and, but we had to go back and tell them like, we can help you. We can run ads for you, but you are going to be in the red. Like they had negative margins, right? And so then of course they were like, oh, it's fine. Whatever. We know. And it's like, oh, okay. So we run the ads, and then inevitably they are, finally probably someone in C-suite is like, hey, what's like, we're losing a bunch of money. And they're like, no, we have to cut it. And it was unfortunate because the ads were in one sense going well, like the brand was growing, but in, I think, a more important sense, they were not going well because they were losing money. But unfortunately it was because of the kind of the finances of the business that was the case. So that was, I think, kind of the takeaway for me there was really just like how important communication is and being on the same page with clients and like really explain, hey, why do we need that number, right? Why is that important and why does this matter? And like maybe once we had that information about negative margins, like maybe saying no, I don't know. But yeah, so that was a bummer and yeah, a learning experience.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think not a ton of situations that kind of like piggyback on that is that operations. I mean, it's obviously it's the most boring part of Amazon. It's terrible. It's awful. Case management, compliance, inventory, logistics, all that stuff. You guys know from operating, an account, that's the terrible part. But man, it is the only thing to me more tragic than not making it is making it and failing because of operations. Like, it's just, to me, it's like it's like one of the biggest tragedies in the world. I think that is such a good illustration of if you're not operating your business correctly, nothing is going to work, right? And so, and I know it's not necessarily like a call on them. Like sometimes just it's a function of the culture of the business and whatever, and it is what it is. But I think as being on the advertising and marketing side, we're the ones that fall on the sword for everything practically. It's like, why are my sales bad? Why is this? It's like, blame the marketing people. So like, I think it's good to learn these things over the year. And I think when we talk about like the client customer care part of it, I think that's our secret sauce. I feel like that's your secret sauce as well. It's like not so much at like, yeah, you want to give them numbers, but I feel like we're a confidant for our clients. We're a shoulder to lean on and to give them perspective and talk about these broader, bigger picture things to kind of help guide them along the way, maybe just outside the context of Amazon advertising. I think being able to take that painful story forward in a similar situation with people that probably have like a more flexible culture. I mean, that could be the difference maker in their business, right? They could turn the corner. Right. Maybe you can help them at ways outside of advertising. So that is such a great call out. Let's kind of pivot to like big, like what you say, the biggest success story that you guys have had. Like we talked about earlier, I think there's always, I don't want to call it like the sweetheart account, but there's always like that account that you're closest with, whether like they're day one, you've been with, that like the rapport is really good and there's good chemistry and you guys tend to be on the same page. What are, they don't have to divulge their niche or anything like that, or maybe like where they're at roughly. What are some things in terms of like, what are some like success they had in terms of scale of you guys growing them? And what are some things you've learned along the way that you think were instrumental in terms of helping them reach that growth? Not just necessarily in advertising, but other parts of their business and everything kind of working together to get moving in that direction.
Yeah. So, I think that a client that I would highlight is in the automotive space. And this is an interesting niche on Amazon because I think it tends to like, if you're going, like in terms of product innovation, if you're looking for areas where there are listings on Amazon that are not pretty, this is a great one to go after. You can really shine here. And I think that was one thing that actually helped this brand really stand out is they did have good creative. They had good branding, and in this particular space, that can be an outlier. But, I think, yeah, so, I mean, awesome experience with them. And part of it is that they were open to experimentation and testing, right? Open to feedback. That's huge. Like we just kind of illustrated in the previous discussion, that can really make or break your experience, I think, working with a client. Not that they have to take all of your ideas, but that they're open to the conversation at least, right? So I think that's really important. And we've been able to get them 40-45% year over year growth. Like it's really, really taken off and I'm like continuing to grow. And so like they're doing like $400K a month now. Like it's looking awesome. Super solid for them. Yeah.
And when did they start? When you guys started working with them?
Where did they start?
Yeah, you said they're 400 now. Where were they at kind of before you guys started working together?
Yeah, so it's like a 40-45% year over year growth for them. So it's been really huge. And I think that what has worked is the kind of the foundational strategy that I mentioned because their products lend themselves well to long tail. And our process is really, really good at discovering all of those long tail keywords. And it's kind of like you've been kind of explaining, it's almost like there's a web of keywords that you convert on, and that all of that works together to give your product a lift, right? Like you said, your footprint, right, on search, and like this sort of neural network. I'm sure that, I don't know if Amazon has something like this internally where they're like kind of keeping track of like a web of keywords that are like determining sort of like a relevancy score sort of a thing. I don't know, but I doubt it's far off from that. That's similar to how Google Ads kind of works, right? And that can give everything a lift for that ASIN. And then especially if you have a family, like that gives everybody in the family a lift, kind of like all boats rise kind of a thing. So I think that is really what has helped that brand to grow, along with I said, their creative that does stand out in a space that is not necessarily focused on design, we'll say.
Yeah, I think to kind of toot your guys' horn, though, is that we have another brand we're working with that is kind of a super fun brand, new launch. It's not the big success story, although they're having a lot of success. It's really fun, but they're in a kind of like I would say sexual wellness, and it's like a super fun, and they're focusing on in this particular space. There's different like sexual preferences, right? And so they've focused on a demographic there that's underserved, and the product's great, and the branding is fabulous, and it's fun, and the copy's zingy. But at the end of the day, if you're not visible and you're not leveraging search properly, like nobody's ever going to see how brightly the gem shines. So I think that's what I was kind of getting at in the beginning of it. It's like, it's not, success in Amazon, it's not all, PPC, and it's not all creative. Like everything has to come together and move in the right direction to create that kind of growth. I didn't get a chance to talk about this when we were talking about like how difficult it is. And in the world of 300% BS, okay, I could literally rant about this for days, but I'm not going to. 40 to 50% growth is exceptionally rare. I think, 95% of sellers fail the first year, right? And of the ones that win, I think it's 5 to 7% achieve 40% year-over-year growth. So you're talking about fractional portions of the overall market. So, and getting that kind of growth at those numbers is pretty tough. It's easy. Like if a brand first launch, you guys will first launch a product. If I'm doing 800 a day, like I could get a 200% increase to 1600. That's not astronomical. Sure. But as those numbers start to get bigger, it gets harder to bring out those double digit growth. So that is super cool. And I also love what you talk about with automotive. As I think about that as a niche just in my head from like a marketing POV, I can see the mess of like, I can see it, and that it's a tremendous opportunity, and it's cool that they've been able to exploit that and work with you guys. And I think they'll have continued success.
We'll see. I mean, I will say, like, caveat, like we probably are close to hitting our ceiling. Like, will we have 40% year over year every year? Undoubted, like that's doubtful, right? But getting them to where their ceiling is so important, right? So I will just say, like, I don't expect them to grow 40% every year, but like seeing that big jump is always exciting, and obviously it makes the clients very happy, and so that's good.
Do you ever use your product development and product innovation experience when you're in these accounts where like you're using search as a tool to surface like other product development? I'm sure you've probably came across stuff as you're looking through that for them. Like, hey, I make like a windshield wiper. Like there's a windshield wiper that's really good for ice and better than snow, or something obscure like that there's nobody there. Has that been a lever that they found to be useful? Have they launched any products off your guys' recommendations yet, or are they just sticking with catalog?
Yeah, absolutely. So not for this brand yet, I guess, but yeah, that definitely comes up, as we're like kind of looking through keywords that are popping out, like, hey, like this product has been getting a lot of keywords around this thing. Like, what could we, like, maybe we could do something else there. So like this is a pretty specific example, but we have a client who sells cutting boards, and this is from the reviews actually, that people say that it gets scratched up. And so, then we decided to go ahead and pair it. We're going to bundle it with like a wood butter, to kind of like as an upsell, as an add-on, but also to kind of address some pain points that customers were having, right? And so I think that's, maybe it doesn't exactly come from search, but kind of a way to, like pitch product innovation to clients that I think can really help them to grow.
That's awesome. So that was kind of like my segue into mine is that I work with the Bioenzymatic brand, and I've been with them since day one. I think they started, would have been late 2019. So just as COVID was starting. So that was clearly like a growth helper, right? And I think a lot of brands had that help. So I'm going to call that out right away. But I think, and I've been with them a long time now. I'll try not to go super long on this because I feel like part of the family with them. Like you work with somebody over the years and like we've had ups and downs. I think their journey taught me a couple of things. The first product they launched was just a standard pet enzyme cleaner, right? And it worked to begin with. Like it was selling great. And then it started to get more competitive. The COVID bubble started to deflate, right? As it did. I mean, sales were still strong afterwards, but that just, things don't stay good for people. Thousands of dollars in stimulus money. They had nothing better to do but home, but shop. Stores were closed, right? All that was helping. As that started to leave the balloon, the business started to struggle. You had a lot of products launched around then. And so, Brian's his name. He had exited a very successful 8-figure business before he started this venture. And he put all of his eggs into this basket in general. And it was getting to a point where the lights were going to shut off. And this guy is a pathological entrepreneur, right? He's been his whole life. He's 60 some years old. He's never had a job. And it was getting to a point where like, I don't know that we're going to be able to continue to move in this direction. And as we talked about product innovation and using search as a tool to find, new markets or adjacent markets or product development, we just kept clawing and scratching away. And to me, it's a case study in like treading water until something breaks through and using search to find these other areas. Like the indoor product led to an outdoor product that took off and basically that it was a 7-figure product in the first 10 months. And that's not typical.
Wow.
All that stuff like content, I think the content was a really important piece, especially in defining feature sets and finding benefits that can really separate you from everybody else, as generic as that might seem. But, picking those relevant things that are meaningful, tangible in terms of the marketing piece. And then additionally, I think this is his secret sauce. The product is designed and engineered to meet those feature sets. That to me is and that's something like it's been an Amazon out approach in his catalog. So we use reviews and search and stuff to find those things and calling those things out one thing, but engineering your product in real time to meet that stuff has been very, very, very successful. And I think it was just that's just where I'm at. Even I think I probably mentioned this in AI post as well. I'm not going to go off topic too far here, but like, to me, it's like, if we're talking about what AI does, there's like, it's not the game changer. I feel like it's an equalizer, right? And so everybody's like, oh, I could do all these cool things, but then everybody's content gets better. And so is that really an advantage? And so moving forward, I think you have to win physically. You have to be able to execute on those insights. I think a lot of people are risk averse and a lot of people, developing a good product is tough, but I think the brands and entrepreneurs that are able to really leverage those insights to create cool products that meet those needs in real time, like that window's wider.
Yeah.
I think that was my big learning there. And they've done exceptionally well. Like you just get really close with people over the years. And I think it was, the downs are part of it. The highs are part of it. But I think that was probably my biggest learning from them is really taking the insights that you're getting from the data and being deliberate about engineering your product to meet those features. I think it's easy to cut corners there. And I've seen it time and time again. I'm sure you've seen it as well. It's like, I'm not going to worry about it. We'll drop it in and see how it sells.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yep.
Yeah. So what else do we have? I think we had some other stuff that I wanted to. Thought leaders in the space. So as we've talked about earlier, is that there's so many voices, right? And so who are a couple of people that you've been following over the years that you think that have helped you on your journey in terms of like the wisdom that they've shared or, shared point of view? Like who are some people and what do you like about their content and why?
Yeah, so a couple of my favorite folks, I would say, I think Elizabeth Green just kills it. Like, I think she's been a big inspiration to me as, just kind of like being a woman in this space. And I think she's got like 6 kids, which like I have no kids. So she's
crazy, isn't it?
She's like incredible. Yeah. So I think that she's great. Like she's knowledgeable, intelligent, like the way that she delivers, everything is really professional and like she seems like just like a genuinely nice person. I did like, one of her lives with her and it was super fun. And so I think she's awesome and she's been a big inspiration to me for sure. And then another one, I would say Michael. I don't know if I can pronounce his last name correctly.
That's why I called him Michael earlier.
Michael from Ad Badger, like he's
Bender. I can't pronounce it.
Batchson. Anyway, Michael F. From Ad Badger. I think him as well. Like I think he's just like I just love how he really nerds out about PPC, and like he's been in it for a long time, and like his podcast was one of the first that I started really listening to and paying attention to about PPC, and like kind of helped me to, I don't know, like look at it from a different perspective, and so I really appreciate him, and he's just always bringing something new, so yeah, I think those two are a couple of my favorites.
Yeah, Elizabeth is definitely, as I've been around a while and I've watched people grow, I think the fact that she has 6 kids, I have kids and I'm not the mom.
Yeah.
Imagine growing a business like that with 6 kids.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like, to me, that is like the ultimate badge of honor. So
I know.
Yeah, she has been uber committed to content creation and just the grind and just creating quality content. And she's fresh and genuine and everything that she seems. And so I completely concur there. As we talk about like women, like my mom was like, not to get too emotional in this, but like my mom was like a very strong personality before like strong woman personalities were like, okay. And so but that's an important part of who I am. But I think in marketing and business in general, I think it can be harder for women to win. Let's be honest. It's harder.
Yeah.
It's harder. Like I've never been on your end of it, but I definitely appreciate that. And so I think Elizabeth shines there. I think you shine there as well. I think you're going to be a big star. And I've said that before. And I genuinely mean that. But Destiny, to me, man, watching her success over the years has been something to behold. Watching her evolution, she's just I think of her, she's just a class act. She's just a class act. She's positive. She's super supportive of her team. She's had people, she's grown people. They've went off in their own directions. She's supported them, even though you could make the argument that they're competitors with her. Man, she has just really done it right. And I don't necessarily, I mean, yeah, I think PPC taxes and all that stuff's part of it, but I think a lot of it has to do with just a commitment to the basics, making great content. And to see her succeed in e-commerce and Amazon and be a successful, female CEO leader in this space has been, to me, it's been truly inspirational. And I love to see it. And I love to see her continue to win because they really are an organization. Who else? Kind of like, I love Michael, but I would say Mansoor, again, I can't pronounce his last name either, but he's with Incrementa. Mansoor Narouzi is a guy I love. I have a penchant for like gritty practitioners, right? And so his stuff with like brand analytics, like he's always coming at things in like these really fresh and cool ways. And so I just eat his stuff up, and he has just a really true commitment to that, I would say. And there's so many others, but I think Desi stands out to me. I think Mansoor stands out to me. And in terms of like general Amazon, like knowledge, like Kevin King to me is like the OG. And I know I kind of like poo-poo hacks and gimmicks and stuff like that because I feel like there's so much of that bull crap out there that's not real. But Kevin comes across some stuff that I'm like his Vine thing that he had in one of his $1 billion seller calls or whatever, like that, where you can, they closed the loophole. But you could have, let's say you're selling black headphones. You can have black, onyx, stealth, all these different forms of black, and you collect Vine reviews on each one of those and parent them together. You don't stock them all. You stock them all in Vine and then destock them. You end up with 400 reviews, right? That's like gaming the system. Is that Amazon TS? Well, it's compliant-ish, whatever. But he comes across things like that. And I think he's kind of a cool one to follow to kind of learn those different things. So I just want us to touch on that quickly because there's so many voices out there. Like, who do you listen to and who do you trust? And it's always good to hear. It's, see if we share. Yeah. So it's clearly we follow the same people because Elizabeth's fantastic. Yeah. So is Destiny.
Yeah, for sure.
And we're kind of going along here. But last thing I wanted to touch on was tools. Right. And I think there's a lot of discussion in our face about the great debate. And I think it's only going to get more, not relevant, but more heated between automation versus manual. And I think AI is really going to like that adds a whole other wrench into the mix. And so I just wanted to kind of get your 10,000 view hot take on software. Should you use software? Is it bad? Is it good? Is manual better? Just kind of like your general point of view there.
Yep. So when it comes to PPC management, I mean, we built our own software, which, for better, there's pros and cons to that. Pros, we can add features and fix bugs and whatever really, really fast. Cons is it just took forever to do that. So we do use our own software. I believe in software. We have roughly a 60-40 split in terms of human intervention and automation via our software. That's in favor of the human. And so really, we use software for those repetitive, tedious kinds of things, like making bit updates, especially for day parting. Like you can't do day parting manually, like you just can't, right? So those kinds of things, like basically whatever a computer is better at, we use a computer for. And then making sure that our team is really well trained to actually like fly that plane is really important. And I think it gets even more important when you put AI into the mix, because like you said, I mean, I think that's kind of it. Now the conversation is almost like AI versus software versus manual, because like our software is really machine learning, right? I mean, we have some AI that we utilize within our stack, but like our software itself is machine learning. Like we're not using AI for that. And like I did a YouTube video recently where I had ChatGPT, like I asked ChatGPT
I saw this.
for advice.
Let's watch, guys. Watch the video. Continue.
I used the 4.0 model and some people were like, oh, you should try 4.5, whatever. But like it completely failed in trying to run a campaign. Like it just bombed, And so like I think that software is just really a tool, right? And you need to use it as such. And so yeah, in our stack, we use like Helium 10. We mostly use for keyword research, that kind of thing. Data dive a little bit, just basically to kind of, so we do our own SERP rank tracking within our software, but with data dive, we can kind of like cross check because, like sometimes it depends on how often you're scraping for rank tracking, and when. So we use data dive to kind of like double check our work, I guess. And then we use LLMs as well for keyword research. It's part of our negation process, which I didn't talk about today, but yeah. So I think if anybody is like, 90% software, like that can be a little bit scary because that means they maybe don't know like what's actually happening or why and that kind of thing. So I think the human intervention piece is always going to be important. And I think that's even more true with AI. Like I think you don't want to get too reliant on AI running things for you because it's only as good as its knowledge base.
Yes, to all of that. I think so many good call outs in there. I think when I kind of look at it, I agree. There's the humdrum, like day to day, like bit optimizations and things like that. And as the machine learning, like I said, we'll figure those things out. And each product, Mitch, there's ups and downs. All that stuff can be programmed in and you can create macros, whatever, that run that stuff. And so that stuff is important. But I think leaning into what you said at the end, I think that is probably the X factor. I think probably the best approach is a hybrid approach like you guys are taking. I really do believe that. The thing that I found, and this is why we're building our own stuff and we continue to build stuff as well along the way, is that I feel like the qualitative analysis piece is severely lacking in software, right? And so I think that's where AI can come in later. And I'm sure you guys are workshopping things as we speak, as we are, to find ways to make that work, which is the intelligent thing to do. But, AI has a long way to go, clearly, based on your video, which is a great video. I think, there's a lot of times where, what would be a good example? Great example of this would be search terms harvesting. So most tools will do something like, and even practitioners will do something like, I'm going to pull my search terms. Let's say I have this search term and it's broad exact phrase. Then I'm going to go back into my active targeting, enabled targeting, and I'm going to determine if it's active and broad phrase and exact. If it's not active and broad phrase and exact, or it's active and broad or phrase, you know what I mean? I'm going to deploy it in those areas, right? That's common sense. So what I've noticed over the years is that you'll have certain instances of a keyword resurface that hasn't worked and doesn't work. And you just take a beating on it every time. And when the software is on autopilot or the practitioner just randomly puts stuff in, and I actually did a video about this. I found in certain situations, tens of thousands of dollars set on fire because we're just retesting the same thing that doesn't work. And so you need to run that across the entire search history of the account from a targeting standpoint. That's how we do it internally. Well, I can't find software to do that. So I had to create my own tool to do that. And then there's another layer above that where it's to talk about the qualitative piece. We talk about, I call them like red flag terms, where like stuff I've taken a beating on, but I don't want to throw in the towel. Like if I first launch a yoga mat, like 2 years later, is that more relevant? I want to revisit those things. It's those qualitative choices that I just don't think software is there. And I think manual still has the advantage. And that to me is like, I don't say the secret sauce, but I think that to me is what the big separator between like agencies and people that know what they're doing and not, I think. And I think each agency has a different tact and approach when it comes to those things. So I'm a 100% advocate with that hybrid approach.
Yeah.
We're 100% on board there. I don't think it's all or nothing. I don't think it's all manual. I think a blend of software, or if you can make your own tech, which is incredibly difficult, by the way. So hats off to you there. Like, it's painful to do that, but I think it's worth it. But yeah, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much, Carly, for chatting with me. I've watched a lot of Carly's content, everybody. It's fantastic. But for me personally, like being able to chat through this with her has been super, super enriching. She knows far more than she's clearly a wealth of knowledge, but there's definitely a depth of understanding there. I think you're a huge value to the community. You'll continue to be a huge value to the community. And I wish nothing but good things moving forward. And I guess we'll chat soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, Carly.
Bye.